Hello and welcome to Between the Lines. On today's show, I have something or someone new who I've never talked to before, so this is going to be exciting. Cam Scholey? Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, hey.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here with you.
Oh, this was such an impromptu interview. It's unbelievable, but it came together. So thank you for responding as quickly as you did.
Absolutely. The timing was perfect. It was serendipitous.
Oh, you know what? I like that word.
Everyone does. That's why I like to throw it in when I can.
Oh, well, I've got a short story that I call Serendipity, baby.
Oh, I got to read that.
I'll send it to you
Right
now that I have your email. But before we get into anything else or the heart of the interview, would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about who Cam is and what makes Cam Cam and what does Cam do for hobbies and where you are in the country, etc.?
Okay, so some Cam basics. I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Boo.
Boo. I love to travel and I like to get out of Toronto. So yay to that.
Yay.
So that's me geographically. Historically, I'm a university professor and a CPA, but I'm shifting away from that business model into the world of memoir and narrative nonfiction. I've been a writer for about 25 or 30 years in the genre of prescriptive nonfiction, which is where the cookbooks are. And what I do a lot of step-by-step strategy. So step one for your strategy, step two, step three, that kind of stuff. A lot of it can put coffee to sleep. I'm not going to lie to you. And that's why I was thrilled to shift into the narrative nonfiction genre of memoir recently. My other hobbies, other than writing, are I love to scuba dive, play hockey, and hot yoga is one of my favorite things to do.
I'm not even going to ask. It sounds painful.
It's hot and painful.
Well, you know, I'm, as my listeners know, I'm a rather large, blind kind of guy, so I see nothing and hear nothing but pain there in that description.
Oh, geez. I'll have to reframe it then.
Anything else you want to add to that before we get going?
No, I think that's enough for now, unless you have some specific questions. I don't like to brag about myself too much.
Well, you'll have an opportunity for that later anyway, so then why don't we get right into it? Question period. I call this question period because this is where I get to ask questions. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Before we get going, though, I have a T-shirt, and this is a true story. I have a T-shirt that on the front it says "I'm smarter than I look," and on the back it says "But I'm dumber than you think." We'll just leave it at that.
Nice. Okay, that's a good one.
Question number one. Where or who inspired or what or who inspired you to start writing? And if they were listening right now, what would you like to say to them?
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to jump into what inspired me into memoir, because I mentioned I've been a writer a long time, but it was business, dry, boring stuff. So I'm not counting that. So who inspired me to move into memoir? I was a fellow by the name of Frank McCourt. And he
I know
wrote,
that name.
Yeah, memoir called Angela's Ashes.
Yes.
And it changed my life, that memoir, because his childhood struggles were so similar to my childhood struggles that I said, wow, I think I should write a memoir along the lines of the template he used. And that was my starting point. I'd also like to thank Tara Westover, who wrote the memoir called Educated much more recently, because she has a real pulse on today's world and the style of writing that's more in line today as opposed to 25 years ago when Angela's Ashes came out. So I would say those are my two memoir role models. And what I would say to them is thank you both very, very much. Thank you, Frank McCourt, for inspiring me to even get into memoir when I didn't think I could. I was good enough. And thank you, Tara Westover, for the ideas that just started exploding in my mind when I read your memoir. It was so well written and so well done.
Fantastic. Now, so you just got into your kind of memoir writing. What was the purpose of getting into that for you? Because a lot of people write it as a means to work through these situations in their life, and not never really meaning to share them? Was your whole intent to share?
That's a great question, because it turns out that it is what you said. It was to get it out and share it with the world. But initially, I just wanted to write it for myself, just to get it out, just to almost as a challenge to myself, to see if I could write a full-blown manuscript and to make it something readable. And then over time, as I was writing, I got other people involved, letting people read it who are in the memoir. For example, one of my girlfriends from high school, who is in the memoir, she was the first person to read the memoir, because she didn't know until she read the memoir last year why we broke up in high school. Because these are things I couldn't even speak about. And there are about 10 or 20 things that I've never told anyone in the world that are in that memoir. And now the world knows only because it's in writing. I still haven't spoke about it. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. I hope I was getting at the essence.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where to go from there. So we'll just go to the next question. Like I told you before we started, though, like I've been writing a memoir, and I started writing it in 2013. I'm close to being done, I think. Where do you stop, right? So how did you know when to stop writing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to your point, it's been, you've been working on it 10 years. Nothing wrong with that. A lot of people chip away at their memoir for 10, 20, 30 years, right? I just took a different route where in 2022, I was still a guy. I'm gonna take you to the beginning of 2022. I was still a guy with all the emotional baggage from childhood. I was having flashbacks, anxiety attacks, and I had a real healing moment at the beginning of 2022 where I was able to detach from all of the childhood trauma stuff. And that detachment, as soon as I came to peace with what had happened, I said, it's time to write that memoir that's been on my mind for 25 years.
Oh, so
Yeah.
It really was cathartic.
And I jumped in. I had a really good friend read my first passage, and she read it and she looked at me. She said, Cam, you need to make this your full-time job. And that's what I did for the next 2 years. And that's why I was able to write mine so much more quickly in less than 2 years, is because it was literally my full-time job, other than some part-time work I took on.
Generally, though, memoirs, to the best of my understanding, like if you remember my T-shirt, is they are a section of your life, not your whole life, because that turns into an autobiography. Right. So your memoir is about a certain specific era, time frame, or
yeah. So let me give you the age range, and then I'll explain why it's that age range.
Okay.
So it runs from 8 to 19.
Okay.
And what I decided to do was not start at the baby. Now, I did start, if you're a memoir writer, nothing wrong with starting at birth and writing the stories to build up to it, because you use a lot of them in flashback, even if you don't use them at the beginning of the book. But what I decided to do was to go with the formula where the protagonist, which is me, you're supposed to pick the inciting incident that set the protagonist in motion.
Yep.
And what inciting incident means is the thing that happened in their life that there's no turning back from now. And for me, that was an extremely violent beating that was so violent and left so many marks on me that my father had to take me away for a week so that the bruising could heal. He didn't want anyone seeing me. And those are the days no one questioned why I was out of school for a week and things like that. But anyway, so that's the inciting incident that set me, the protagonist, in motion, because our family fell apart after that. And then the hardships and the struggles. And then it became evident after that why my father became so violent. He has bipolar, severe bipolar. And not that bipolar makes people violent, but what bipolar can do is the sufferer doesn't understand the magnitude of what they're doing. They don't understand how severe what they're doing actually is until afterward.
or necessarily the consequences of what they've done or are doing.
Right, exactly. And so our lives all unraveled after that. And so the next several years were of much instability. But here's the kicker, okay? So it starts like that with this heavy theme for about 2/3 of the book. But then my mother met a fella, and then my life became like the novel Great Expectations, where this young boy, Pip, he's poor, things aren't going well for him. And then someone literally knocks on the door and says, by the way, you're rich now. You can buy all the clothes you want, go to the school you want, here's the house you want. My mother met a fella named Dave, our stepfather, who took us. Yeah, thank you, Dave. We miss you, Dave. Rest in peace. He was my Great Expectations turning point. And things all went well for me after that, except the struggles and the psychological battles that would continue, because I still had a real father out there that was looking for me, didn't know where I was petrified of him. And then he eventually did come back. And that was when I was 18. So that's toward the end of the story. And I explain, what happens when he comes back. Mm-hmm. And that, but the story ends when I'm 19, high school's finishing, and I'm just about to sail off to university. And so it's not a sweet, happy ending or anything, because I still have a lot of battles forthcoming.
That's your next memoir.
My next memoir, you mentioned anthologies a bit earlier. My next memoir is going to be a set of short stories, I think, in anthology format, and then I'll get into that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Right. Okay.
Next question: do you have any writing rituals that, or habits that help you stay focused and productive?
Yeah, you know what? The biggest reason I didn't really get writer's block ever is because I'm a big picture guy. Like the first thing I did when I said I'm writing a memoir is I drew it out on the wall. And I don't mean I wrote on marker on the wall. I have sheets that I put up.
Yeah.
Sheets of Post-it notes.
Like in a Hollywood writing room.
Well, kind of, except it's Hollywood North, Toronto, not actual Hollywood. But anyway, so I set up the whole structure, and I would start working on whatever part was in my mind at the moment. And sometimes it was when I was 10 years old, and then I'd get a little bit of writer's block, like I'd be finished in my thoughts, and then I'd look up and see a scene from 12th grade that I wanted to start writing. And so I was back and forth and all over, and I don't think that style works for everyone, but that ritual, it worked for me successfully when I was in the prescriptive nonfiction genre, and so I thought I would try it in the narrative nonfiction genre too, and it worked for me there too.
And it worked, eh? That's nice.
Absolutely, yeah.
And was it a smooth transition, or did you really have to make it work?
It was not a smooth transition at all, because
they never are.
Right, because I always had people beating me up in the past to reduce my word count. I'd say, look, if you want me to say all that, I'm going to need 5,000 words. And they say to me, well, you're going to do it in 3,000 words, because people's time is money, and because this is business now, right? And so when I moved into memoir, it's like, hey, you can use all the words you want. There's no word count limits. I mean, obviously, you're not going to add extra words if it's boring, but there's no one literally counting the words. Use as many as you want.
Yeah.
So that was a real positive, welcome adjustment that I made. But I did have to take a course on narrative nonfiction and memoir, because it was so different from prescriptive nonfiction. I'd never written in that kind of thinking about sensory imagery. When you're talking about corporate strategy, you don't really talk about sensory imagery.
No, I can't imagine it happening.
No. But the transition was fairly smooth after I took a good course on it and attended some lectures and stuff.
Well, yeah, you knew how to streamline what you needed.
Right. I knew I'm a good writer. I just needed to do it in a different genre.
Perfect. This next question is geared specifically for something else, but we're going to go and we're going to make it into fitting what we're talking about here. So how do you think the role of the memoir writer has changed over time?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind are the self-publishing opportunities that exist now that didn't in the past. And that's a real bonus for us, because in the past, you needed to get an agent who would find you a publisher. And sometimes you lose your voice in the process because there's other editors involved, and then the publisher wants this. And so your voice can get a little lost in that. And so the self-publishing current trend is a beautiful way to just be authentic and make it your opus, your own personal work of art. I would say that's the biggest change that I've noticed. It opens up doors for many people.
I would agree with that to the extent that in the past, most memoirs were about celebrities. Yes. And now you don't have to be a celebrity to do that.
That's a
good point. Most celebrities' memoirs are ghostwritten.
True, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so they're not authentic to begin with. So
just put that out there, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
See, I can think on the spot. I told you I was going to do that.
I knew you could. I had the faith.
And you haven't even listened to any of my podcasts. Shame on you.
Well, I'm going to catch up, I promise.
What do we want to ask you next? Is there anything you want to toss in while I'm looking here? Oh, here we go. Okay. Can you discuss any specific challenges or opportunities you've faced as a Canadian author?
I'd say my biggest challenge is my small platform. It's something that most of us can relate to, right? And not that Americans don't have a small platform, but they have more opportunities for a larger platform. So what I decided to do, and I went against the advice I was getting advice, search engine optimization, cast a wide net, try to get everyone who will read your book to read it. And I'm like, no, it's too personal. It's not that kind of book where you just want everyone to buy it. I don't want to maximize sales. I want to maximize readership and connection.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do to deal with that challenge is to cast a very small net, but to go deep in it. So for example, I grew up in a place called Owen Sound with my father in Georgian Bay.
Yep.
So I'm part of that community now, and speaking at their library and things like that. And I'm trying to get involved with the people who were part of the memoir, my high school friends, family. Start there, and then I want to see it grow out organically as opposed to the search engine optimization. It's just not my thing.
You know what? The people who want to read it will pick it up and read it.
Exactly. And like you said, just because I'm not famous doesn't mean it's not a good book, right? And so we can get published now. And, not to sound shameless self-promotion, but it's 4.9 on Amazon. And for me, when you self-publish, right, you kind of wonder, is it really good enough to put on Amazon? And so that validation was very important to me.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
How do you think being part of a writing community has impacted your work and yourself?
It's made me better, and hopefully, when I add comments for other people, it's made them better. I think writing communities are an absolute necessity. I'm a bit of a private person, so I'm not like the first to jump on every
You're a lurker?
Mail and try to contribute to everything. But I do kind of say, yeah, I can help that person, or that thought, is helpful to me. So I'm kind of on the fringe with respect to writing groups.
Okay.
So kind of that semi-involvement, and that's comfortable for me. But I encourage people, get to your level of comfortable involvement with writing groups. Absolutely, if you want to improve your writing.
As a matter of fact, we're having this interview because of a comment I made in a mutual writing group that we are in.
Case in point, right?
And you responded to it, and here we are, less than an hour later.
Right. And I've learned so many things in the last hour, and hopefully you've learned some stuff. So this is just one example of a writing group in action.
Absolutely. And by the way, my great-grandfather used to tell me the day you stop learning is the day you die.
Yeah.
and that can be taken two ways. So
Keep learning. I think I would take from that.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, so yeah, we're in the same group, but from that group, there was a little bit of frustration on my part, and I started my own group, and I had a lot of people come over and follow, and now my group has grown to almost 2,000 people.
Well, 2001.
It's a closed group, but I've got your email. Add me as a friend on Facebook, and I'll invite you.
Done.
Okay, after this, if that's okay still.
Oh yeah, so far.
You never know. What is your favorite thing about writing? Or let me rephrase that. What is your favorite thing about being a writer?
The free license to be as creative as you want. And then obviously in the editing stage, the creativity, you need to be realistic, but that license to flesh everything out, to make sure you've really explored all the nooks and crannies and done the research. I love ambiguity, and I know a lot of people don't love ambiguity, but I love the ambiguity that came with writing a memoir, because you say, I'm going to write a memoir. And then it's like, what? Where do I start? But to me, it's a challenge, and it's a fun challenge. So to answer your question, what do I like about it? It's the fact that every day was different, no matter what. I was writing every day for, 700 days, but every day was still different and rewarding.
And you were doing it freely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in every interview that I've done, there's been an eighth and mysterious question. But unlike all my previous guests, every question has been a mystery to you. So I'm looking at the eighth question here, and I'm going to change it in midstream. And later when we're done, I'll read back the question that I skipped over for you. But
okay.
Cam, if I showed up on your property in my time machine and I said, hey, Cam, let's go. When and where are we going, and why?
Oh, wow.
You're welcome.
We're going to go back to the 90s. I'm going to start there.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is I was working on something last night about things about when I was 23. Let me explain that.
All right.
I started a podcast with the young lady who was my editor for my book. And she's very brilliant. So we're doing a podcast together because it'll be, I think, interesting to have a Gen Z matched up with a Gen X on a podcast.
Okay.
So I tell you that because we're going to end the first podcast with this list of things that when I was 23, this is what the world was like. Just to show how old I really am. So
come on now, I've got a few years on you.
Yeah, fair enough, right? I shouldn't say that. I'll give you an example though. The year I turned 23 was when the Berlin Wall came down.
Okay.
So stuff like that, just to show like, wow, we're going back in time. But I would say you and I are going to go back to the 1990s, the early 90s, when life was fun and the weekends meant going to see live bands. So it was work hard all week. I studied hard during the week as well, and going to see live bands. Now, did you say where we could go?
Where and when and why?
Okay, so where is the Bahamas? Okay. And we're going to go, well, at least I'm going to go scuba diving with the tiger sharks.
Okay.
And the hammerhead sharks.
I'll stay on the boat and watch, and I'll be content.
Most people say that. Interestingly, I talk about in my memoir, I grew up petrified of sharks because of the movie Jaws. Because I saw the movie Jaws in the theater when I was 9.
I saw it at the drive-in.
Okay, there you go, right? And young. But I grew up with a lifelong fear of sharks. And I thought, well, what's a good way to get over that fear is to go scuba diving with them. Just jump right in. And it's a real adrenaline rush to do that. And so I want to go do it again in the Bahamas.
As a visually impaired person, though, that the the overall reasoning behind it escapes me because there's nothing for me to see.
Understood.
Right? The fact that I can go underwater with scuba gear, that would be exciting. But the reason for being there, it's lost on me. But anyway.
Well, let me say this, because that's only half our trip. So we're done with the Bahamas. And then I turn to you and say, it's your turn. Where do you want to go?
Oh, you can't turn this around on me, can you?
Okay. But what I'm saying is I'd be so polite as to do that. That's
I can answer that very quickly.
Okay.
I can answer that very quickly. 1969 Woodstock.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I'm with you. That's a great choice.
And even more specifically, to see the set that the Grateful Dead did.
Okay. Well, I'll watch that with you. But I'd love to go see Joe Cocker.
Yeah.
And The Who.
Oh, yeah, that would have been cool. Abby Hoffman getting hit with the head. Getting hit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, yeah.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to see the Grateful Dead down in Syracuse, New York in the early 80s. So,
right on.
Yeah, I hitchhiked.
Okay, that's part of your hitchhiking.
Another one of my hitchhiking trips. All right, we're going to go on to another part of this show that we call shameless plugging, and which is really what this show is all about, because right off the top in the introduction to the show, it's where I get the chance to introduce the listeners to lesser known Canadian authors. Right. And because the big five are busy pushing their brand names and they're big people, right? They don't, my opinion only. Correct me if I'm wrong, big five, but
got two opinions of the same.
Oh, well, hey, I'm not alone. Good. All right. So shameless plugging. What book do you currently have that's available, and where can people find them?
Right. My book is called This Happy Home, and it can be found on Amazon. It's got a 4.9 star rating, and there's a lot of reviews. So if people want to read the reviews before making a commitment. Chapter 1 is free of charge on my website, which is camscoley.com. So it's just my name.com.
Spell it for them once again.
Yes. So CAMSCHOLEY.com. And there's a couple of trailers on there which are really well produced. Like they're made for TV video trailers, except they're for a memoir, but you'd think they were for a movie.
Oh, okay.
Kind of trailer.
Yep.
There's two of them. But I was mentioning, chapter 1 is free of charge if people want to read it, get a feel for if it's this type of read that they would like.
Excellent. Is that the only book currently then?
It's just out now. It's just been a couple of months now.
Oh,
so okay. I'm really trying to focus in on the promotion and what does a guy like me with no platform, how do I promote it? And
you reach out to people like me.
Yeah, well, there you go, right? So this has been a great day. Absolutely.
Question number 2 then. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have anything current in the works for writing. I've got a couple of ideas, but just they're in the genesis stage.
Okay, so there's nothing close to completion or even starting.
Nothing to brag about yet.
All right, so I guess really, if I were to ask you what if you were to choose anything that you've written, what would be your favorite? It would be This Happy Life.
This Happy Home.
Home. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. This Happy Home. Absolutely.
Happy
I'm
Home.
really proud of some of the other publications I have, but this one to me, it was it's a personal journey. And I did so much healing and came to so much forgiveness in writing it that it was special.
You probably saw me laughing. So I call it a blessing. Sometimes I call it a curse. People will say something that triggers something in a song, or do you know what I'm saying, right? We all have that. So you just said something about, I can't remember what it was now, but I instantly flashed to the U2 movie Rattle and Hum. It's a personal journey. I think it's sorry, that's a blessing and a curse, and it comes up at the most inopportune times.
It's pretty entertaining to watch.
And lastly, I mean, you've already touched on this a little bit, but we'll do it one more time just in case. Where can anybody connect with you the best? Facebook, TikTok, email, snail mail, the list goes on.
Yeah, camscoley.com.
That's the best place?
Probably the best starting point, because my email's on there. I'm easy to contact through camscoley.com. Facebook I'm on. I also have a public image on Facebook about healing and forgiveness and my journey, trying to show people that the therapeutic powers of writing. I can't speak enough about them now, and I like to share that with people.
I happen to agree with you. That's probably why it's taken me 13 years, because I keep thinking of new things to write, and this needs that's just the way our mind works. So when we start something, and then well, what about this? Because that connects to that, and my mind is a spider web of many different things.
Well, it's like you were asking, when did I know when to start the memoir? When did I know when to finish? It's hard, right? It's hard to know when to the intro and the conclusion should be.
Yep, absolutely. So I was talking to you about my memoir, and so when I added, it started off being my 13 years on the street. My friend, the writer, said, no, you need to add that, and then you need to finish it with this. And then it became an autobiography rather than a memoir, and it sat like that for many, many years. And then I went, no, that wasn't the original vision. So now I've had to take it all apart, dismantle everything, and focus. Okay, now where did this leave off? And so if people want to know that stuff from reading my memoir, then they're going to email me or contact me and say, can you write that? Or can you write that part? And that's how that works for me in my mind.
Makes sense. Yeah. And that's a good example of how there's so many different ways of doing it, and none of them's better or worse than the other. It's case by case.
Well, yes. And we start with an imprint in our mind of what we want to do.
Right.
And then it just expands from there, and some of us have the discipline to stay focused on the task at hand.
Yeah.
So, Cam, this has been very, very interesting, very fun for me, because I've never had to do an interview so rushed. And not that we're rushing through the interview, but to get it together to do it.
Right.
And I kind of like it. So thank you.
I found it rewarding. Yes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming on. And thank you for being part of Between the Lines. And for those of you listening out there, support. You need to support local writers, small-time writers, such as myself and Cam, and anybody else that you know that says, hey, I've written a book, support them. Any last words?
This Happy Home, available on Amazon. And I look forward to staying in touch with you, because you clearly have a lot of good stuff going on.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you
so much for having me.
It's been my pleasure, totally.
All the best. Cheers.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Between the Lines, the podcast. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Your passion for literature and the written word is what makes this journey so extraordinary. But before you head back to the world beyond our literary haven, I have a quick favor. If today's episode resonated with you, help spread the word. To explore more about me, or read the blog, or hear all episodes of Between the Lines, head over to www.therandylacey.ca. If you believe in the magic of writing and want to be part of the Between the Lines community, show some love by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee button in the top right corner of the page. Your support, no matter how small, helps me bring fascinating conversations with talented authors and writers. Your support is crucial to keep this literary ship sailing. Please consider subscribing to be notified of any news about future content. If you have any questions, comments, or are interested in being a guest, email me at randy.btlpodcast@gmail.com. So, until next time, happy reading, writing, and living between the lines.